We're now just a few days away from a Rugby World Cup. And you know the bit in a Pokemon game where it goes duh, and then goes, what? Wiggly Chicken is evolving, before the music gets all duh, 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 duh. Well, imagine if you had to fight the Elite Four in the middle of your little guy turning into a Biggly Chicken, because that's the challenge that currently faces Wales, Scotland, Italy and Canada this year. Women's rugby, at least for the teams I'm about to talk about, is in a fascinating state of evolution, and whilst winning the tournament might be a bit of a stretch for those sides, what we're about to witness from each of them could set the groundwork for the next decade or so for these teams to come. This is a vital competition for these four sides. Wales might be the cleanest place to start, because this is a completely different side to who they were 12 months ago. This time last year, women's rugby was being neglected by the WRU. When the pandemic struck, the WRU made, frankly, the quite disgusting choice to gut women's rugby entirely to save money. The pathways were shut down. The regional sides lost their funding. A whole half of the sport was just gutted. Players weren't being paid to play. Fixtures weren't being arranged. They hired an unqualified coach on the basis he could save them money by coaching the Sevens team as well. And most shockingly of all, star players, amongst their best players, were having to crowdfund operations for injuries sustained representing their country because they weren't covered by WRU insurance. There was no organisation, no structure, no real clue in coaching, and very little in the way of morals or concerns. Enter new WRU performance director, Nigel Walker. Because now, women's rugby is only being neglected by the WRU below national team level. Those problems at lower levels are still huge and strife, but thanks to Walker's influence, there is now, for the first time ever, proper investment and optimism starting to pour into the women's game in Wales at the top level at least. Wales now boasts the most fully professional players of any country in the world, a first-rate coaching team, and as extensive resources as England or New Zealand. They're sharing most of their resources with the men's team. These were changes Walker began making in his first week in charge, but not ones he intends to stop anytime soon. Because whilst he hasn't said this in so many words, if you read between the lines, it becomes quite clear that he and head coach Owen Cunningham have a very clear vision and an even clearer goal: to win the 2025 Rugby World Cup. In some ways, that makes this year's tournament a free hit for Wales, a trial run at the real thing in 3 years' time. But it's bigger than that. Not only can they secure automatic qualification for the next tournament over these next few weeks, Wales have their best possible chance to turn themselves into a name worth respecting, or even better yet, fearing, by the time that tournament rolls around. As such, whilst their group is extremely unforgiving, it's perfect for building experience of big games and possibly a giant slayer reputation. Scotland are the only side in their group Wales have ever beaten before, yet I don't think there's anyone in this group that they couldn't. Every match in this group is an opportunity to make a statement, and if they can escape it, there's no reason they can't match the best ever result of a semi-final in 1994. Whilst the electric Jasmine Joyce rightfully nabs headlines left, right and centre, it's impossible to ignore the world-class form of her fiancé, Alicia Butchers, who for me was in contention for Player of the Six Nations. She's a proper all-action flanker, equally comfortable making game-deciding sidesteps to assist winning tries, or bubbling around breakdowns to disrupt England's ball excellently. However, whilst we've seen improvements across the board since the advent of Walkerism, perhaps the most spotlight-worthy shift in any player in this Wales side for me has been centre Hannah Jones. Always a good player, she hasn't necessarily improved in last year, but rather adapted how she plays the game. For anyone who knows men's rugby, the way Jones has played this last year has almost felt to me like Cunningham took one look at her and went, Do you mind if you just become Jonathan Davis? Can you just become Foxy now? Can you just become Jonathan Davis? Is that right? She's a slightly less exuberant player than she used to be, but has transitioned into a quietly brilliant decision maker, a masterful defensive organiser, a solid tackler, a good ball carrier with a strong handoff, and a really lovely way of just gliding on the outside of a defender. But the most notable similarity is actually the one I feel in myself as a Welsh fan. It's the calm I feel when I see her in midfield on a defensive set. Hell, at this point, you might as well just swap the red bobble for a grey scrum cap and be done with it. Concerns should be rightly raised about Wales after the two chunky losses in World Cup warm-ups, where the Canada game felt like a classic warm-up story of a side who spent the last few weeks beasting fitness and scarcely touching a rugby ball. The England game was odd because Wales conceded very easily, yet it was also one of the most positive packed 70-point losses you'll ever see. Wales' set piece is an enormous problem at the minute, but you can fix a line out in a month, and the scrum had an edge against most sides in the Six Nations, so it kind of looks like it's just England being so much better than everyone else issue. But in the other area of nitty-gritty, we've seen a big improvement in Wales' kicking. Here, in the second half against Italy just a few months ago, the last game of the Six Nations, Wales win possession of the ball 4 times in their own half here, but simply can't exit efficiently. They've got no way of getting up the field. It takes them 7.5 minutes to get out of their own half, and that's only because Hannah Jones makes a nice half break to get into Italian territory. They played a largely forward-based game in the Six Nations, yet it's impossible to execute that when you simply can't get down the field of play. These last 2 games, the visible increase in Ellen Snowsill's kicking game has been enormous, due in no small part, I'm sure, to the hiring of our Lord and Saviour Stephen Myler as kicking coach, leading to Wales getting into the England 22 more times in the first 15 minutes at Ashton Gate in their warm-up game than they did the entire corresponding match in the Six Nations, thanks to the increased range on Snowsill's kicking. However, I'd still be a little concerned that only Snowsill and scrum half Kira Bevan look comfortable kicking tactically when facing teams like England and France who have entire backlines of boot-based chess players, but if Wales can kick well, I think they could just be the surprise package of this entire tournament. Italy, likewise, are a team who could feasibly finish anywhere in their pool. After struggling through their games against England and France in this year's Six Nations, they frustrated Ireland into posting a low scoreline at home, then picked up 2 victories against Scotland and Wales at the end of the tournament. They're perhaps earlier in their metamorphosis than Wales or the teams I talked about in the previous video, but with the Italian Rugby Federation having only recently professionalised the game, this Six Nations saw them genuinely improve week on week as each round went on, and it wouldn't be on them to pick up a scalp or 2 as they go in here. In fact, they've already done that in pre-season, with a frankly heroic win over France. They're excellent at the breakdown in particular, causing the Red Roses more problems there than any other Six Nations side did. It's also quite a settled team, with the spine of the side well established. They'll look to 100 cap scrum half Sarah Baratin and uber scrappy number 8 Elise Giordano to drive them around the park. But the player to watch can be no one other than the exceptional, phenomenal, world-class Beatrice Rigoni. A playmaker with a properly complete skill set, great hands, superb kicker, and just a properly exceptional rugby brain who was brilliant in their win over France. Properly excellent. Because if you have to prove that Italy are capable of a big World Cup upset, that was it. Italy looked calm, comfortable, but above all else, they looked like themselves. They pounced on every last French mistake, bringing a top-class opposition down to their level, something they did in patches against them in the Six Nations, as well as against the Red Roses. Their ability to pull off a result like this is perfect going into World Cup, and sends a message to their contemporaries that if you're going to beat Italy, you have to at the very least be at the top of your game. However, if they're going to pull off the results themselves, Italy do need to overcome 2 big problems that they've had this last year. Not only were they frequently broken down in unstructured play, their defence on the first few phases is grand, but once things get looser, it becomes a problem. They also really struggled to take any chances they had themselves. They're a very good team at putting themselves in positions to win games, but daft as it sounds, Italy are going to need to learn to score tries. But if they can, again, they might pose a real threat to the USA and Canada, because unlike their male counterparts, Canada's women's rugby team are a real force. They hit into the World Cup, having won 6 of their 7 games this year, but you can go back even further. Canada have only lost 1 game to a team other than England or New Zealand since the last World Cup, including a win over France in 2019. It's a top quality team full of exceptional players. We've got experienced campaigners such as Laura Russell and Tyson Beckerboom. Alexandra Tessier is a really classy operator in midfield who's hitting brilliant form this year. She's a player with a really classy, to use that word again, touch, a beautiful decision maker with incredible timing and empathy on her passing. She's just such a great player to watch in midfield. However, the real one you want to keep an eye on is their brand new captain, Sophie de Goody. Right? First and foremost, Sophie de Goody is an unbelievable rugby player. She's pretty much the model modern forward. Carries hard, works harder, with soft hands and hard hits, all part of the package. All with the added bonus of being a first-rate goal kicker. However, none of this should come as any surprise, because Sophie has captaining Canada in her blood. 35 years ago, Sophie's father, Hans de Goody, led Canada out at the very first Rugby World Cup in New Zealand as captain. And not only does Sophie now follow in his footsteps in New Zealand, but those of her mother as well. Stephanie White de Goody, the first woman to ever captain Canada in rugby union, also went on to skipper the Great White North, the first Women's World Cup in 1991. And it's now their daughter's turn to make their nation proud. And this is a Canada team who can go far. Once again, England might be a bit of a stretch for them, but don't expect them to lie down. They're the only team, bar France in the last few years, to lead against England at any point, and they've proven an absolute handful to literally everyone else. And having played the Red Roses in the 2014 final, you know this team will be absolutely desperate to go one better now. And a game against France or the Black Ferns in the knockouts could be absolutely box office. That could be a phenomenal game to watch and something to very much look forward to. However, with most teams in this World Cup, there's a lot to say. But with Scotland, there's a lot to say. However, most of it should really currently being said by the Union. Because for those unaware, Scottish rugby is currently dealing with one of the most tragic, upsetting, and frankly disgusting scandals the sport has ever seen. I don't want this to overshadow the team and the rugby itself, but I think it's presently impossible to discuss this team without mentioning the tragedy of Siobhan Cadogan's death. And so, I want to put this in the starkest and cleanest terms possible. Last year, back row forward Siobhan Cadogan, who played in that year's Six Nations, died of causes relating to a series of concussions suffered whilst on duty for the Scottish national team over the year leading in. Instead of being looked after by her union, she was screamed at to get back on the pitch, offered no mental health support, and bare minimal attention to the brain injuries she was suffering. In the words of her own parents, they fixed her broken bones, but turned their backs on her broken brain. Going on to say, if somebody had referred Siobhan to a neurologist at any point during her illness, she would still be here. Since this article, stating the Cadogan family's intention to take the SRU to court over their complicity in her death, the union's chief executive, Mark Dobson, who you may remember from doubling his own salary and bonuses after the 2019 World Cup, has refused to launch an external investigation into what happened and tried to distance the union from responsibility. In a recent interview with the BBC, he even said he would need to establish a time frame on whether he's spoken to the family in the last 3 weeks. What happened to Siobhan was an unspeakable tragedy, and the SRU's continued commitment to absolving themselves above honouring her is nothing short of abhorrent. And yet, as Siobhan's own family point out, rugby gave their daughter her happiest days and finest memories. And that is ultimately the task before her teammates this tournament, to create more of those and do her proud. The scandal has rather overshadowed the team's preparation, but you've got to hope this can only galvanise a team dropped into a really tricky pool. Yet Scotland, this Six Nations, were so supremely close to pulling off some really special results. The Red Roses game was tricky, but they probably caused more trouble with the ball in hand than any other team other than France. This try, finished by Stuart Hogg in a blonde wig, Chloe Rowley, was a beautiful bit of construction, highlighting Scotland's biggest strength, their patience. This is the team happy to wait and play, and a side with extremely good ball retention. The try that got them into this World Cup, this absolute screamer, was such a long time coming, eventually scored in the very last play of the game, and that patience almost saw them grind out wins over 3 of the other 4 sides in this year's Six Nations. They led for most of the game against Wales, only for this try by Fionn Lewis to win it really late on. They looked to have the beating of Italy until 10 to go, and Ireland was even more devastating. Enya Breen converting her own try in overtime to beat them by a solitary point. This is a side who spent the Six Nations on the brink of really clicking and giving every side a run for their money, and now they have, since then, professionalised the setup. We might just see them start to do that. Actual roadrunner wearing a bobble, Rowena Lloyd, and Rowley are the obvious standout, proper ballers who can create a try from anywhere, but Jade konkel-roberts, returning from a stint out to kickstart her career as a firefighter, is simply one of the best number 8s in the game. Abrasive and impossible to drop to the deck. The things that really set her apart, however, are the extras. Not only does she have lovely hands, she has an unbelievable, unbeatable, utterly world-class work rate. Konkel's stats for her last Six Nations before her firefighting break are truly extraordinary. The top carrier in that competition, and second most metres made to Emily Scarrett, yet she played 143 minutes less than her and 128 less than Poppy Cleal, the next best carrier, who she made 19 more carries than, leading to Konkel averaging 1 carry for 4 metres every 3 minutes she played. In fact, her stats are almost identical to Semi Andrandra, the top player for carries and metres made in the last Men's World Cup, who played in the centres and on the wing. She's legitimately ridiculous and could be Scotland's most important weapon in causing that upset that they're very much looking for against Wales and Australia as the competition kicks off in just a few short days. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. This is part 2. I'm covering all 12 teams in the tournament in the lead into the the first game on Saturday morning as we are UK time, or Saturday whatever time in your time. There'll be a next part coming on Friday, looking at the remaining teams in this tournament. And if you do want more,
it's going to be the best part as well, because there's 5 whole teams covered in it.
Thank you. If you do want more on like any of the teams as well, I had nothing to do with them, but there's a great documentary on the ITV player now if you're in the UK on the Red Roses. There's some wonderful people involved in that. That's very good. That's well worth looking into. And also one on the BBC iPlayer on Wales.
They're the best team in the whole tournament because they're Wales.
And one on the Black Ferns as well on Sky New Zealand's YouTube channel. It's well worth having a look around. There's loads of stuff being pumped out for this World Cup, which is really exciting. And the thing itself starts on Saturday, so I'll see you on Friday for more of this before that begins very, very soon.
The best tournament.
Proud of your defensive effort, especially absolutely outstanding today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you just said, the defence was immense by the girls. They put their boys on the line. You know, that's the 3rd in the world, and we took it to them. And sorry.
I mean, any team, let's play hard.